In this week's episode, we have John Cunningham of Victory CTO. He is one of the co-founders and has some amazing war stories of the work that they've done for their clients. I think the service they offer is really interesting, but regardless of if that service may ever benefit you, I think that the stories are absolutely worth listening to, and it was a great pleasure talking to him. I think you'll learn quite a bit from it, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, I love feedback. Please reach out to me on Twitter at Dave_Albert or through email, podcast@dave-albert.com. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, we're joined by John Cunningham, founder of Victory CTO. Hey, John, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Victory, please?
Sure. So, I am a serial entrepreneur, hacker, volunteer dog raiser, and former and again frequent executive. I've been building businesses mostly in Austin for about 25 years. And as you said, I am one of the co-founders of Victory CTO, which is a digital evolution company, which is a good way of saying that we help companies go to another level, usually starting at the technical area, but often getting into marketing, operations, finance, project management, and that sort of thing as just part of helping somebody level up.
Okay. Excellent. And so you've started a number of companies with the same co-founder. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, sir. So my co-founder, Chris Jelick, he's a co-founder of Victory with me. And I have been doing this, like I said, for about 25 years, literally since we walked out of college. And we always kind of come back to this. And the first company that we started was a ed tech company called PickerProf. And PickerProf was a way for students to find which professors graded more or less difficultly. And so we actually went and got grading histories from about 800 colleges around the country and put real historical records online for folks. PickerProf turned into MyEDU, kind of expanded scope, and then MyEDU was sold. And for a couple of years, Chris and I built some things on the side while we both did worked for other people for a little bit. Mm-hmm. During that time, I was the CTO for W2O Group, which is a PR and marketing firm based really out of San Francisco and New York. They had a fairly large office in Austin at the time. I saw a lot of friends from there. And then after that, we split off and started Victory. And Victory was started with the idea of taking people who are the kind of gray-haired and scarred executives and professionals who have been through the battles. They know what they're doing. They're not cheap, and they can come and help you get through a difficult problem that you have. So we really try to center around helping businesses with difficult problems, and helping them with a difficult problem, and then being able to leave afterwards. It's kind of important to us that when we set up an engagement, there's an understanding of what an exit plan is going to be, because we're not in the business of being button pushers. So, okay. Yeah.
Nice. So what are some of the types of engagements that you typically deal with?
We go kind of all over the map, but I have some fun, interesting ones recently. So we just to give you an understanding of the range of the spectrum, we'll help out somebody who is literally just trying to do something like saying, we had a customer come to us about a year ago, and they said, we need SEO. And we said, I'm not really sure that you know what you mean by that. Let's talk some more. And it turned out what they needed was really an entire marketing plan. And the final solution, oddly enough, ended up being email. Email was the most effective thing to help them solve their particular goal. And we approach everything from a test and measure and a, as we like to say, math and magic kind of mentality. Everything can be tested. The internet now is broad enough. You can test any idea that you have. You can test any methodology that you want to use. So let's test everything we possibly can, because we understand that all of us is smarter than one of us, right?
Yep.
So figuring out that email was the right thing for them took a couple of tests in a couple of different places, but they were just kind of throwing money at Facebook and hoping something would happen. We see that sort of thing happen a lot. We ended up tripling their inbound business by setting them up with the right kind of email campaigns. We go from something of that size all the way on the other end to when a company has been split or purchased or some kind of a large event has happened. Usually they need help, and they need help because the tech team disappears. They need help because, the people that really had everything in their head and knew how things were running, optioned out after the merger, after the split. Or if here's one fun example. This is a company based in Austin, wonderful people. And the company had really kind of two primary businesses. One of them was editorial, and the other one was more on the consumer side. They were very closely related to each other, but they sold the consumer side off to another company, a larger company that had the same function, and they kept the editorial side. When they called us, the entire tech team had given their 2 weeks notice.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a rough place to start. And their system was kind of this hand-built and riddled with tech debt. And this is a web. This is started as a website, and as it often does, more and more functionality was kind of put into it until this thing was really kind of running their core business. Yeah. So we were in there for about 6 months. And we sent in a group that I kind of refer to as our digital archaeologists. It started with sending in the roughest, toughest project manager that I've had the pleasure of working with. And I basically told her to document everything in everyone's head on their dev team. She did not let them out of the building until about 7 p.m. most days. And she just got everything she could possibly get out of them. And then after that, we sent in some of our folks who are just very, very good one-man engineers, and that's not a good thing in a development group. But in a situation like this, you want somebody who can just dive deep and stay in there for a while. So we had one go in and help with the process, and one go in and help with the actual code. And we managed to keep them from shutting completely down. They actually had a deadline that was a date that was somewhere in the database that the date had to get updated. And this is the silliest thing, but no one knew where it was. And if that date hadn't been updated to be the next year's date, by the time that date hit, the website was just going to not function. So, we got that cleared in the nick of time, and then kind of slowly worked our way out. The interesting thing about that whole engagement is that the other half of the company, the one that split, and was sold off, also hired us. And we worked with them for about 2 months, and then we fired them. Because if you're asking us to come in and help you, then I kind of need you to listen to my advice. And when we come in and do work like that, and you're not listening to my advice, and you're continuing to make big mistakes, and you're continuing to make the problem harder, no matter how much you're paying me, and I don't want to be part of that situation. Because for us, it's very important that we produce good results. Yeah. And I can't produce good results if the person that I'm working with isn't taking my advice. Yeah. So not to sound like my advice is the only way, but it's It's more along the lines of, advising the same things over and over again and just getting a complete, thanks, that's a neat idea. Please go push these buttons I need you to push.
Yeah. I mean, if you've gone through the trouble of hiring you and are willing to pay you, you should probably listen, or or what's the point?
Yeah. No, that's a good one. And so, like, looking back on that situation, so how can you avoid getting into a situation like that, right? Tech debt is real. Bit rot is real. And these are things that can absolutely take a company down. And oddly enough, the thing that it really comes down to is just process. Are you making room for your engineers to build in tests? Are you setting up, automated tools to regularly test everything and make sure that you have a certain amount of test coverage? You can automate tests. Are you documenting? Are you documenting the work that people are doing? Are the people who are doing the work documenting the processes they have? And are you making sure that knowledge is being kind of spread around? When you end up having one or two people who kind of, and almost across the board, in every of these difficult situations we've been into, there's some guy's name, and you can feel it coming. It's Bruce or Doug or Fred or something like that, and everybody keeps referring back and say, well, Fred knows what's going on. Well,
I've been that guy.
So if you look around and you're realizing that you have this linchpin guy, if you have a guy on your team that you're afraid to let go on vacation, you're doing something really wrong. And that's when you're going to end up getting in a situation like this. So those guys, if they had done a little more to keep tech debt out, they had a lot of stuff that was old, deprecated libraries that they weren't keeping up with. And if they had done a little bit more to document, and honestly put a little more budget towards the cleanup, then they would have been in much better shape. We had early on, late 2015, we had a client that is a purely editorial website, purely content website, and there was a commerce component to it as well. The commerce component was a significant portion of revenue, but it was its own separate website being run on one of the commerce platforms, right? So we didn't really have to worry about that. They were good with that. But they called us in to do an audit on their Amazon account, their AWS, and we went in with a full kind of gray hat mentality. So they'd been recently purchased, and so they had some money come in the door. And they'd been kind of on a tight budget before then. So they had this outside firm that was doing their web development. And it turns out that the guys were effectively just robbing them. Like, this is a company that not only has editorial but also sells products. When Black Friday came around, their site went down for 48 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Anytime these guys did a code release, it took 6 hours, and the site would almost definitely go down at least once or twice during that time.
Jeez.
Oh yeah, and this site has 7 million users a month, 7 million unique visitors a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So the page load times were in the 10, 12 seconds. Often, it's one of these things. It makes you really impressed that they're doing as well as they are, given. Because it's like they're walking around with weights on their legs.
Yeah.
So we did a review for them. We ended up building about a 45 document, not 45 page, but 45 document review of everything that was going on, as well as recommendations and what they should do to keep things from falling apart in the short term and in the long term. And it took us about a year to get them to a good point, but we ran through it. And the very first thing we did was what I refer to as we wrapped a warm blanket around their stuff. Their code base was 4 years deprecated. Like the main libraries and frameworks they were using were more than 4 years deprecated, just riddled with security holes. The code release process was effectively non-existent. Their Amazon setup was cobbled together with string. So we went into their Amazon and their AWS, and we built them an Elastic Beanstalk setup. And then we kind of put everything in there and got it all to hold together. I don't think a server lasted longer than 4 hours before it crashed. But Beanstalk would take that one out, put another one in, and just keep things going. On the first day, we released code 14 times with no downtime. And that's with their old code base.
Nice.
And by the time we were done with them, we had their page load time down to 400 milliseconds. We had rebuilt and fixed and moved their entire content engine. We rebuilt and fixed and moved their entire, they had a big forum site. This is a specialty, passionate kind of niche place for people. So they had a large forum site, and we moved that over to a different provider. Did a deep integration of their commerce with the content. So if they mentioned a product in an article, there'd be buy now links on it and that kind of thing. And did a full refresh of the front end and the back end. That took, like I said, almost a year. By the time they got to the next Black Friday, they sailed through it with no problems. So, and then as I mentioned, we backed out of that at the end of the year. We kind of handed them everything. We gave them the documentation. We helped them hire on some more permanent and less expensive developers. And then, they called us a few times with questions for about a month or two, and it's been a great relationship. A couple of people from that company have gone other places and they've called us in. That's kind of how we build and grow our business. So,
awesome. So when you go into an engagement like that, how overwhelming must it be at first? I mean, just the scale of the problems. It seems like, obviously when you tell a story to make it interesting, sometimes the negatives may seem a little bit bigger, but there's no way that they could seem much bigger than what reality has to be because of all the different things that were not quite right.
No, it's, this is the fun. That's the fun part for me. Honestly, is kind of that beginning phase. I like the architecting. I like the building. But I'm as I mentioned when I was introducing myself, I'm a hacker. I'm not. I have a marketing degree. I don't have a computer science background. But I'm a geek and I'm pretty good at this stuff. So, I like to get in and dig through and see what's going on and find all the little hiding things that are maybe stories that people don't want to hear. You're a financial services company, and I have to come and tell you that you're incredibly insecure, and you have a really high probability of a hack. So we need to wrap some things up very quickly, and we need to do it fairly quietly. I don't enjoy that part. I don't enjoy having to tell people those things, but doing that exploratory part is really kind of the fun part. There's in some of the channels in our internal Slack, the number of different dumpster fire animated GIFs is just out of control.
This is fine.
Yeah. This will be fine. No big deal. We actually had one just last week. New client. We've been helping them with a cloud migration, and they're on bare metal right now. And they called us in to put them into AWS. And there's resistance coming from the old development staff that kind of didn't think it was possible and that sort of thing. So I'm on a trip, and I get a phone call while I'm changing planes, and said, "Everything's exploding. Please help right now." So I got some of my best folks on it, and they had not. No single event had happened. They literally just crested over the tech debt elephant, or maybe the last feather that broke the tech debt camel's back as it finally hit. And this place had 100 employees who could not do any work during the time that this was going on. So we spent a day and a half just kind of getting them back to where they could function again. And then, and the amount of stuff you discover as you're going through that, can be really, really interesting and scary. And this is another place where they had, the guy, There was the guy who had built all of the things, and he's a nice guy and he's a smart guy. But he had a lot of pressure on him from his boss, who was building. This is a company that got very that had a lot of success fairly recently, and a lot was built on top of this. And I think that this is an entrepreneur who's bootstrapping his company up, and at some points, I'm sure made some decisions about cost over quality, or maybe just didn't understand right what he was looking for. So as long as it worked, he was fine. And then it got to a point where it didn't work, and usually they could solve the problems themselves, and they got to a point where they couldn't. Yeah. We were already in the process of migrating them over to the cloud, but we were wanting to take another couple of weeks to do that. As I told him, it's not fast; it needs to be done right. That's another one where there's the one guy, there's the tech debt, and the developer probably doesn't have the amount of room that he needs to make sure he's doing it right. And that's that's a big lesson to be learned there. You need to give people room. Yeah.
And I mean, I know in the systems that I've built, I mean, even just in this company, I don't think I've got any dumpster fire technical debt, but of course technical debt accrues. And, we do take time to go back and pay down some of that debt. But I know I've made decisions that I knew at the time were not the best decision, but they were the best decision with the resources, the time. Time is a resource. It's the most important resource in most cases, especially for a startup, since you don't have unlimited money.
Right.
It's so funny. When I was an employee, the decisions I would see management make and think, oh, that's ridiculous. I would never make that decision, not in a million years. And then being the one making that decision, knowing this is not the decision I want to make, but it's currently the least bad thing I can do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest challenges for an executive, and especially for a CTO, because being a CTO is great. You don't have to, go shake the toner in the printers. That's the CIO's job. You're in charge. You're in charge of of what makes the company great, of what makes the company different, of what leads the company forward, right? And depending on the company that you're in, being a CTO may be really the second job after the CEO. And the CEO's main job is if you're in a startup, to raise money, and if you're not in a startup, to keep the stockholders happy, right? That's what he does. Yep. Your job after him is to push the company forward. If you're in a company where technology is not the primary driver of the company, like a PR firm, for instance, I was CTO for a PR firm. We still had a staff of about 60 developers and tech folks, and then another 100 analytics people that we had to kind of take care of. We're still building and creating new things, but you have this constant pressure and battle and fight of having the CEO's responsibilities to some degree of making sure the company, stays in business and makes a profit and doesn't just spend all of our money and doesn't take a year and a half to do something. You have a customer that comes to you and says that I want you to do this thing. And you say, great, we can do that thing. And they said, I'm going to pay a lot of money for it. And say, fantastic. I love money. Money's great. And I say, but I need it yesterday. And everybody looks at you and says, you can do that, right? So, and that's when some of those decisions get made.
Yeah.
Finding the place to make sure you pay that tech debt down further down the road, or if nothing else, just put a flag on it. Put a flag on it, identify it, make sure it's known about, and then it's not a surprise when there's issues later on down the road. But as a CTO, you have to make those calls and say, this time when I have to pick two out of good, fast, and cheap, this time I'm going to pick fast and cheap, and this time I'm going to pick good and fast, and understand where you're putting your resources when, and then talking to your development team who wants to do it right, and translating that message and helping them understand, I totally dig it. I'm with you, and I want 85% test coverage. But we have to get this feature out the door in order for paychecks to come a month from now. So let's get this feature out the door, and then we'll go back and try to work on it if we can, or maybe we'll cut some corners where we can't. Nobody likes to cut corners, and you cut too many and you end up in a really bad spot. Finding that balance, that's the biggest challenge. That's the daily struggle for somebody who's a CTO.
Yeah. Yeah. And even beyond just decisions like that, I mean, the actual which cloud service provider we're going to use. It's perhaps you get startup credits and you choose a provider that you wouldn't have thought you would have chosen. And it's so funny to have known that you may have in the past said, I'll never use that particular company because I know the reasons not to, and the company you're with chooses them. And then later you're making that same decision for business reasons. And it's nice to get a different perspective, but it's really funny when life lets you realize that you're also full of shit.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I've been lucky to spend most of my career in the position where I was kind of guiding those things and making those decisions and at that starting point. As I've only ever had one job, and that wasn't a company that I started. But in those early stages, you're not just the president and the CEO, but you're also the janitor. And you make those decisions and you back them up. And then 4 months later, you back out of them. And then you have to explain to your partners and your employees and your financiers why it is that something that you were absolutely sure was the right thing to do 4 months ago is really just not going to be it now. To me, that's the difference between the kind of people we hire at Victory, as I said, the gray-haired and scarred folks who've been through it all, and that's why I find so much value in that. Yeah. Because when somebody is ready to take a beat, when I come to one of my own folks and I say, this client, new client, and we got a lot of work we need to do for them, so it's going to be really great for us and really great for them. It's going to be a great story, but we got to get something done in the next 3 days. And they look at me and say, I really need 5. I've now come to the point where I respect that. And I go back to my client and I say, look, I want, this has to be done correctly. So we're going to need more time on it. And if you don't want to do that, I don't want to help you do it incorrectly. Yeah. There's a wisdom to that. And that's something that we really value.
And that, you said to put a flag on your technical debt. Another option is to have workarounds that you can spin in a nice marketing way. I remember hearing a story about a self-healing router. And basically the self-healing was that it rebooted itself every night at 3 a.m.
That was the original data center that I want to say E-Trade worked out of, or one of those big trading platforms, was all Windows servers. And this was in, 98, 99. Yeah. And they would literally just reboot, a tenth of their data center every hour and a half. Just to keep them that fresh. No server was online for more than like 10 hours at a time.
Wow.
Yeah. No, that was guys. Oh man. Yeah. By the way, when you have something like that happening, that's what you call a feature.
Yeah. Yeah. What size companies do you typically deal with? Or is it range?
My favorite size company to work with is between about 50 and 300 people. And I've actually spent quite a bit of time figuring that out. The super small companies, the 15 and 20s, and I have a story about one of those in a minute here. They have a need for maturity usually, And the best thing I can usually do for them is point them in a good direction, take them out for a beer, give them some solid advice, and maybe help them find a contractor they can work with directly. Mm-hmm. They're not going to like the size of my fees very quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't like working with them because of that, because the alignment is not right. And alignment is really the very most important thing. My dad is a corporate governance expert, and just growing up around the dinner table, we talked about corporate governance. I know this is really exciting, but the thing that I took away from that is that alignment is absolutely key to really anything you're doing, any decision that you make, any way that you set it up. Well, let me finish the question on the size companies we like working with. When you get to be 60 or 70 people, plus up to about 300 or 400 people, you're in a spot where you can probably use people like us to help you through a tough problem. Mm-hmm. And that's we come in, we help through one tough problem, and then we leave. And those are really great. Mm-hmm. Those are also ones that are ripe for the fireman kind of mentality. So for us to come in and put out fires and solve things really quickly, because they'll have an audit they'll have a big deal with a new customer and an audit coming in from them, and they realize they're absolutely not going to pass the audit. And we can help them from a process perspective. Sit down and say, here's the thing. You don't have to get every question right, but you do have to answer every question. And have a plan for how you're going to fix it. That's all the auditor wants to know. Right? And we can work through that with them and work through the pieces and kind of take that problem off their plate. So that's the ones I like the most. Getting into enterprise, we've done some work with some enterprise clients. There's a large company over in the UK in Cambridge called Jagex, which is the guys behind RuneScape, if you're a gamer. Oh. And an old client of ours went over there, and they're doing, they're moving into the cloud. This is not a secret. This is a 350 person company, 350 developer company, that is moving the world's largest MMORPG from their bare metal servers that they've had for the last, I think, 17 years or 20 years that the game's been running, and into AWS. Well, they wanted to make sure that they were doing everything right from the very get-go. So we brought in one of our AWS experts, and the entire engagement was less than 200 hours. And we did the whole thing remote and spent time with their core team, who had all gone to AWS training, and worked through how to lay out the architecture, how to lay out the architecture so that you have solid security everywhere, so that you have upgradability, so that you are keeping an eye on things, so you're monitoring things correctly. And we just acted as teachers to a very large degree. At the end of it, we had rebuilt their corporate website, which the only reason you go to the corporate website is if you were looking to get a job there. So that was the one that had 400,000 people on it at 4:00 in the morning. That was the one that had 10 people on it, right? Yeah. But we'd done it in a way that matched their long-term needs. Mm-hmm. And so we can work with companies of that size, but the place where there's good room for success, there's the ability to help build people up and kind of help somebody upgrade their own skills and abilities, which we really love doing. And where we can really help people solve problems is in that kind of, 50 to 300 or 400 kind of area.
Mm. Do you find that because you want to deal with problems, come in, help solve the problem, and then leave, do you find that you then have to acquire more customers than if you were able to carry on with the same customer over time? Or do you see enough value from people going to different companies?
That's a good question. And it was something I worried about when we were first starting Victory up. But given Chris and my skill set and the friends that we had and the direction we wanted to go, we really felt strongly this was the right way to start. The cool thing is I don't have to do a lot of sales. People keep coming to us. It started with Chris and my own network, then some of the other experts that we've brought in their own networks. and then a little bit of reputation from there, and that sort of thing. So, we'll have a customer come in from an article that we put out, or something like talking to you on this podcast. Maybe somebody hears this and they have a particularly difficult problem they need a little bit of help with. To me, it just feels more honest. In all honesty, it feels more honest to look at someone and say, I don't want to be a button pusher for you, because you can hire somebody to do that for $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And that's not the kind of work that I want to do. And I don't want to get in conversations about, can we figure out a way to make the monthly bills cheaper or anything like that? Let's figure out how we solve the one big problem that you have. And then you call me the next time you have another problem. Now, the neat thing is, I don't have a single client that has not come back for a second thing.
Oh, well, that's good.
Or a third thing or a fourth thing as time kind of goes on.
Good for you.
Yeah. And oddly, it's the idea of pushing on them to say, no, you got this now. You can do this yourself. I've written the documentation. We've set up the architecture. We've helped you hire and find new development talent. And so now you take the ball. You go and do that. And then they do it and they feel empowered, and then the company grows, and then they find a new, more interesting problem down the road. So it hasn't been a big problem yet. But I hope one day people are so done with big problems that they don't need our help.
Nice.
Yeah, nice world.
I think you said you had a story about a smaller company.
Oh, yeah. So this was, these are some neat guys, and they had this company that has an app that is it's a mobile app. It was kind of a daily tracking mobile app, and I'm gonna leave it at that. They had very much, like, they had built their company up in the most interesting and just kind of crazy fun way in the process of doing it. It's a bunch of young folks. And I feel old saying those words. But they'd moved their whole company to Austin from out of state just because they wanted to be in Austin. They had a third partner that they had bought out along the way, and they were still kind of working with that guy on that. There were relationships between different members of the staff, and like going into their offices can sometimes you end up in the middle of like interesting and in-depth conversations or arguments happening between people who had been together or formerly been together or all kinds of interesting stuff. So it was a very kind of tight-knit group. And at the same time, the one thing they didn't do any of was the actual tech, right? So they had a tech guy. Here we're back to the guy again. And he had a staff of about 3 or 4 people. And they decided they wanted to hire a boss for him. So we were actually called in by the recruiting firm that they had retained to hire a boss for the developers, because they didn't have anyone on staff who could actually vet someone with a technical background. And we'll do that. So we came in and we sat down and met with them just to try to figure out, okay, what do you need? What are you looking for? It was about a 2-hour-long meeting, and by the end of the meeting, they said, okay, can you come like 20 hours a week and help us just straighten all this stuff out? We brought their dev team in, and their dev team all looked us straight in the eyes and said, you hire somebody, we're all going to quit. And can you imagine being in a situation as a founder where you're kind of being held hostage by your dev team? I mean, this is your baby. This is your thing that you've grown and built, and you're paying for with 10 credit cards. This was not a venture-backed company. This was a bootstrapped company that had really built this thing up on their own, and being just held hostage by your developers. The most fun part for me was when we had when one of my DevOps guys went in there to learn a little bit about the infrastructure, and the head dev over there tried to explain to my guy how Amazon RDS works, the base database service.
Yeah.
And he kind of sat there and listened and nodded and smiled, and he said, I'm certified level 3 for this. It was okay. You don't know what game you're playing right now. That was a great engagement in the end, because we really went in and we spent 6 months constantly trying to reduce the number of hours we were spending with them on a weekly basis. It went from like 30 at one person, and we sent one guy in there. He's a guy who was the perfect guy for this group. And his name's Boyd Hempel. He's a wonderful fellow. So we sent Boyd in there, and he worked it from like 30 hours a week to 30 hours a week, but I'm going to do 10 of those from home, to 20 hours a week. And then eventually, and I'm going to do 5 of those from home. And then eventually he was just like meeting with them once a week or so. And by the end of it, they had it. They hired a whole new team. We got rid of all the guys. The guys really did quit. Half of them did quit. And they brought in a new lead. And even they ran into a problem with their mobile app. And we even swapped them over from native apps to progressive web apps, or PWAs, which is that's a whole other conversation. I think PWAs are the future. And oddly, Steve Jobs' original concept with the iPhone, but now finally come to fruition. But we switched them from Android and iOS native apps over to a single PWA, and I think saved them like $1 million a year in fees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing PWAs in use other than this company?
What's funny is you get surprised by them once in a while.
Mm.
The most recent place I saw one, I went to a conference last week in California, and the conference, of course, had an app. And I didn't want to download another app. I didn't want to give somebody else permissions for things on my phone. I'm a cybersecurity guy. I am not into installing every app that I see, right?
Mm.
And so I went to the website on my phone.
Right.
And the website had a little thing at the top that said, "Do you want to install the app?" I said, "No." And then it said, "Well, do you want to just save the website to your home screen?" That's a PWA, right? Mm. And I absolutely happy to do that. And it was great. It was, exactly what you needed it for. Honestly, any situation where you're not concerned about the physical capabilities of your device, right? If you're making a video editing application and you need to know whether you should use one codec or another based on the certain chip the device has, you should be building a native app. If not, you should absolutely not be building a native app. And we've done React, React Native. We've done what was the older one? There was an earlier similar kind of thing. React Native was a really neat idea, and the idea is that you kind of build your React app, and then you take it and you kind of make a copy and you wrap a little React Native thing around it, and now you have a native app.
Cordova or
Cordova is another one.
What was the other one? It doesn't matter.
the React Native promise is just a failure. You're building 3 almost completely independent apps with some shared components, and that's somewhat more efficient. But with a PWA, you're truly building one code base. It's the same code base you use on web, and the same you use on your tablet, the same one you use on the phone, and the rules of responsiveness and screen sizes and all that stuff is well baked in, easy to understand. And now you're going to take a good web app and supercharge it with the ability to take pictures and know your location and store data to the device. We're about to start a implementation with a new client where we're going to move them from native apps over to PWAs, and they have a very interesting need as well, which is that they sell directly into large corporations, and they want the app to be branded for the corporation. Well, they can't put it in the App Store because, one, it's a big pain in the butt, and then 2, everybody would be able to get to it. Yeah. So what they've been doing so far was custom building. They take the application they already have, they skin it, and then they recompile it. But now they have 5 of these things out there floating around without clear upgrade paths. So, and they're doing incredibly well, but they want to get to 200, and doing that with 200 different apps. I mean, I can't even imagine. And they have, when you install that on iOS or Android, you have to go through the security things and say, yes, I know this is a, unsigned application. I want to install it anyway. That looks kind of scary.
Yeah.
So when it's just a web page that you save to your phone, that's super simple. So I really do think PWAs are going to be the way of the future. And app stores will continue to do well. Don't get me wrong, but I think that they will be what will drive faster development and faster prototyping for sure, and faster compatibility, broader compatibility, because the rules of the web are a lot more well established than all the local APIs.
Just thinking through what I might do differently if I were starting now.
Yeah.
Because we've got native iOS, native Android, and we're now working on our web app. Our initial thought process was our target are doctors, and most of the doctors in Ireland and the UK have iPhones. So we started with iOS. Then we found that because of some peer-to-peer elements, that having one platform didn't really serve us well. But we have a large amount of data that's in use. A few other reasons I had a few other reasons why React Native was not going to work for us. And everything I've seen, I made the right decision on that. But I'm wondering if we had structured what we were doing a little bit differently, how we could have done that with a PWA. Still, I'm unsure. I believe that there definitely will be a niche that uses them. I'm not sure how widespread it will be, but I'm very interested to see what happens with it.
Yeah, I respect your thoughts on that, and I know I'm acting as a big supporter of PWAs here. I think the key thing that will happen to make a change happen there is that people need to get over the App Store being the source. And I think that's just going to be a matter of adoption and time, because once you go to the web page or get the link in the email and hit the link in the email, and it opens a web browser and says, do you want to save this to your phone? Once, it's weird.
Yeah.
And then the second time, it's okay, I've done this once before. And then if you get hit with it 4 or 5 times, and I think that'll help the adoption curve move. So
yeah, absolutely. Once there is a mainstream solution, the mainstream product that uses that, I believe it will catch on in a lot of cases. But that first step is where I'm curious where it could happen.
Yeah. And like I said, I've started to see it in these. So the place where it should be really obvious is when you have to pump out apps really quickly that are customized for something. So the conference app, right? Yep. They wanted that to be the app for that. It was the Ingram Micro IoT conference they invited us to come down to, and they wanted it to be the app for that conference. Well, you can make an app for that conference with one configuration file if you already have a conference app framework and system set up, and then after the conference, you don't have to worry about paying people's fees or anything else like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But no, I'm very interested in doing more of them in places where it makes a lot of sense to do more of them. I'm never a fan of trying to push somebody into something that is not the completely right decision for the company.
Yeah.
I always tell you that at Victory, we're language agnostic. We're happy to work in any language that we have the skills and abilities to work in. We tend to slant away from the Microsoft side of things, mostly just because that's the people that I've been hanging around with for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
So, we're more the Linux and open source and Apple and Android and Java and Python and PHP and all the various JavaScript libraries and front ends and that kind of stuff. A lot of consumer web, because again, that's a lot of my background. I built the ed tech companies I built were consumer facing. And and Chris and I both were consumer facing. And so understanding what it takes to make consumer web work really well is just happens to be within the skill set of people I hang out with. So we slant in those areas. But you come to me with a Python problem, you come to me with a Go problem. I'm not going to tell you that you need to switch languages because it's a religious conversation.
Yes.
I don't need to have a religious conversation with you about it. I may tell you that you need to switch languages because you're using PHP and you're doing something that's highly memory intensive, and PHP is memory hog.
Yep.
I may tell you how you can, fix that problem and keep using PHP.
Yeah.
So it's and also don't want to be known as, a place that does one specific language. There's room for that. There's places for that. Salesforce, we do no Salesforce work. Somebody comes in with a Salesforce problem. I have a guy down the street I send him over to. He's wonderful. He's got a great group, but I don't want to grow that expertise.
Yeah, I'm starting to see the PWA thing now. No, my initial thought was all the things in the App Store, how they get transitioned. But what it should be is all the things that think they want to be in the App Store, but don't. Mm-hmm. Your grocery shops, the toy shops, conferences, like you said. So there are a number of things that users would be happy to have, but don't want to go to the App Store because it's just weird. Why would I install a Walmart app or Aldi or Tesco over here?
And it's also it's the pain of doing it. You're talking about the local. Think about the mom and pop. So here's another example from remember I told you earlier about the real estate project that we did. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot about how how IT works within the real estate world in the United States, right? And to make a long story short, they have a shared protocol, effectively. It's called RETS. And RETS is a description and a protocol of how a system should work. So it's a system that self-defines. So you ask it, what can I do? And it gives you the list of commands, what you can ask for and how you can ask for them and what the data shapes are going to look like and that kind of thing. Because it is a standardized system, every real estate agent has API access to RETS, although most of them don't realize that in most systems. And again, the Board of Realtors controls. And then they can also just go in directly into the core database, which is usually stored on a server underneath someone's desk in the local real estate office, in the local Board of Realtors office. So because of the way that data is structured, there is a whole cottage industry of people who build systems so that you can have John's real estate search website and Bill's real estate search website, because as a real estate agent, you're branding yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And they all want to be able to have the search websites. Well, all the search does is hit the search API and come back with the answers and put it up on the website. So those are really lightweight websites that are hitting somebody else's back end. And then usually there's some amount of having what's the word I'm looking for here? Like a saved search so that it'll send you emails, right? For a saved search.
Yeah.
With a PWA, those guys could just add on to the website. If you happen to visit it on a phone, save John's real estate search website for you here, right? And then that guy probably never could have afforded to have somebody build a native app. Mm-hmm. They probably wouldn't want to go through the trouble of getting the appropriate keys and compiling and putting it in the store. But he'd love to be on your homepage, especially when you're in the process of searching for a house. He'd love to be able to, have that search send a notification to your phone instead of an email coming in, because that'll get your attention a little bit more. So I think those mom and pop industries may be where we see the people who build the systems that are kind of designed to be set up and then do something for you. Like you might see a PWA add-on for WordPress before too much longer, where it's a plugin somebody makes, and now you can have that website as an app on your phone.
Ooh, that's interesting.
That's 60% of the web I keep hearing people say is WordPress.
Yeah, that's actually I had a episode out today with a fellow who works at Automatic behind WordPress.com.
Yeah.
That's the commercial offering. So that one actually came out today, and I think he mentioned that statistic, whatever the number is.
Yeah. No, WordPress is fascinating to me. I'm not personally a fan, although what I'll tell most people is if they want to do WordPress, they should use WP Engine because they take all of the security risks away from you. But it's got its place, and it's got things that it's good at doing. It's just not where I play for the most part. So.
Yeah, it's keeping everything up to date, all the plugins, making sure you know what. I mean, it's just like every single tool you add into your tool chain, the more you grow exponentially your attack vectors. So
and take something that, as you say, as we said, runs some massive percent of the content websites on the internet, and it's in the responsibility of people who may not be very technical to keep it up to date. That is a major attack vector. So
yes.
It's a massive honeypot.
Yep.
So by having somebody else who takes care of that for you, I'm sure Automatic does the same thing when you sign up with them. It's just I pay for WP Engine because they're literally down the street from me in Austin. So it's kind of like back in the 90s and 2000s when the vast majority of computer viruses were for Windows.
Yep.
Because that was 95% of computers that were out there.
Yep. Any more stories?
Man, let me think about this a little bit. Talked about that one. This one, there was a. This is one that I wrote a blog post about not too long ago. But we had a client, and this is a client that we've been kind of done with for several months. Wonderful guys. We solved a really fun, hard problem for them at first, which was that they needed to be able to have their system run in completely segregated physical, but really digital areas. So their customers are large chain stores, large kind of medium box companies, say pharmacies, convenience stores, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And these guys run some software for all of them that touches the stores and everything else. Well, the customers don't want their data to be on the same servers as someone else's data or even in the same area. So we designed this really fun thing using Google Cloud where every new customer gets their own Google Cloud project, which has this kind of natural data segregation at play. And we built the system in such a way that at rest, like without anybody using it, it only costs about $100 a month to run a given client. And anytime they had a code push, the code would actually mirror into each project separately and do its own full build and deploy in each one of the projects. So they didn't have to worry about keeping the code up to date everywhere. It was a neat system. It was a fun system. It was a really fun engagement. So we finished up with that about the end of last summer, I think. And kept in touch with those guys. Every once in a while they had a problem, a question, that kind of thing. Well, about a month ago, I'm getting up and drinking my coffee and my phone rings and it's one of my contacts over at that particular client. We'll call him Joe, right? And then while I'm talking to Joe, caller ID calls and Bill is on the line. He's also from that company. And then I look down and I get a text message from Fred, also the same company. And what had happened, they have a call center and while most of their stuff is in Google Cloud, the call center was using AWS Connect, Amazon's call center software. They fired the call center manager the day before. The call center manager had the root account for AWS, for all of AWS. Now, they didn't have a lot in AWS, but he had the root account for all of AWS. And he was very unhappy. So he left and he went home and had some unhappy thoughts, and sometime in the middle of the night, deleted everything. Turned off all of the servers for the AWS Connect, or turned the system off. I'm not personally very familiar with it, but and fortunately, most of the stuff that he turned off was something you could just turn back on. Then he changed the password, and then he changed the email address so they couldn't do a password reset. And this was a shared email address. So it was like admin@company.com or techadmin@company.com. Those are things when I see those things happening, that's always a red flag.
Yeah.
And they say, oh no, it's safe. I share it on LastPass. No, it's really not. So we do so they call us up panicking. Fortunately, I have some friends who worked over at a very large company that had their own AWS rep that they knew who it was. And I got all of them in touch, and they figured out that they figured out what had happened to the account. And in the end, they had to send the FBI in to the guy's house to get him to give up the email and password. But they were completely, thrown off. And all they'd had to do was practice just really fairly basic information security and account security. If they had not had a one shirt thing, if they'd had even MFA set up. Yeah. So we went in and did kind of a 2-hour regroup with them afterwards, and I walked through their AWS account with them, and I made sure that they had checked the top 5 boxes that's right there in IAM. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of have helped keep an eye on it since then. Now they're all practicing better information security after that. But it's I mean, you imagine the feeling of realizing that your call center, 40 people who are working all day long solving other people's problems, are now sharing the one backup cell phone that's supposed to be the thing they use only at night.
Whew. That's I think I know what my nightmares are going to be about tonight. I don't know which one of your stories, but one of your stories.
The nice thing is all these problems can be solved. And
yes.
I mean, the guy that called me last week, so last week was already last week. Wow. The guy that called me last week had one very bad day of missed productivity. And the next day he was all patched up and moving again, and fortunately sees what needs to be done now, and we're working with him on doing that. Even the worst of the hairiest of these, with the last second deadline of finding the one record that you need to change, or all of these are solvable problems.
Yeah.
And take a deep breath, realize that. I think the reason I started doing this type of work more than anything else is that I'm just very comfortable under pressure, from having done this for 20 years. So I can look at you and say, I understand you're panicking. Take a deep breath. Just give me the access and we'll get this all figured out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we should cover before I let you go?
Man, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
No, it's been a blast. I've loved every minute of it.
I should make sure that I pitch Victory appropriately.
Yeah, please do
that sort of thing. So I asked our marketing lead to write me an exit speech, and she did, and I don't have it. Victory is a digital transformation consultancy. So we help you do whatever it is you need to do to get to the next level. And that can be as simple as doing some diagnosis and helping you understand, the software you need to pick or a process you need to fix. And it can be as complicated as tearing your entire system out and completely rebuilding it and making sure that you have zero downtime to your business in the process of it. We are the gray-haired and scarred, experienced, smart, usually funny, and sometimes mildly grumpy, depending on the day. Ninjas that can come in and kind of fix your problems. So you can find us at victorycto.com. You can email me directly at jwc@victorycto.com. Happy to. I never miss a meeting. And always interested to talk to interesting people about interesting problems.
Awesome. Is there anywhere on social media that you're active?
Yeah, we're on Twitter and stuff. It's twitter.com, Victory CTO is the Twitter handle. I think that's the same one on LinkedIn. And we've got a number of them on Facebook. But Twitter is definitely, we'll post everything on Twitter. You know what? I have our website opened up right now. I probably should just look because I'm sure it's on here somewhere.
I can add all the links into the show notes after, so no worries there.
No, that's fine. I am not the best person in social media.
No, not a problem. You're busy solving the world's tech problems.
And the cybersecurity folks who've been through it all put less and less and less on social media on a daily basis.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate the time, man. This has been fun.
And thank you all for listening.
Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.